While you were witnessing Secretary Gates, did you get a sense that he was a guy who was stewing over what he was witnessing, that he was disgruntled in any way?
Absolutely not. In fact, I was surprised when I saw the stories yesterday because I always felt they had a good working relationship. He always indicated that he had a good working relationship with the president.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. As we now are joined by our friend Bill Kristol, founder and editor of the Weekly Standard. By the way, that was David Axelrod, the former White House official to Barack Obama, and now MSNBC political analyst. Hello, Bill.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
Good. Happy belated New Year to you.
You too.
All right. So let's start with the Gates book and the revelations. I've noticed a spin today where they've tried to make it seem like, or when I say they, I mean the media, that the focal point was Biden. And they have to, talk about Biden and the accusations against him. And while they were scathing that for 40 years he's been on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision, nonetheless, to me, it's a big yawn when you have what he said about Obama and, in fact, Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, Biden, that's just a policy. He's got, bad policy judgments. We knew that already, I think. No, I think it's pretty startling. I worked with Bob Gates in the first Bush administration, George H.W. Bush. I was Vice President Cross Chief of Staff. He was Deputy National Security Advisor. We were at the same 7:30 senior staff meeting every day for most of, I guess, three. Eventually, he became CIA director, but for like two and a half years. And I wasn't, an intimate of his by any means, and we stayed casually in touch. And I would say I was really surprised by the book. Bob Gates is a team player, a professional, and his normal instinct would have been either not to write this book, I think, or to wait till President Obama was out of office, or simply to pull his punches. I think there's a degree of real unhappiness and, I don't know, disdain maybe for the president and the way he ran his White House, in particular with respect to the war. I mean, this was a nation at war. Bob Gates took that very seriously. I don't agree with Bob Gates on some foreign policy issues, but he took over as Secretary of Defense and really tried to be a serious defense secretary at a time of war for, 5 years. And I think he was dealing those last 2 or 3 years after Bush left and Obama took over, dealing with a president who didn't take seriously being commander-in-chief in time of war. And I think it really got to Bob Gates, He really found that distasteful and inappropriate in some of the things Obama said and his cavalierness about especially ordering young men and women off to Afghanistan to fight, while at the same time sort of saying, well, in effect, basically having the attitude that the only thing there to do is to get out. So I think the Gates thing should be taken seriously as the judgment of a guy who's not a real conservative, whose instinct would always be to give the benefit of the doubt to the president he served, and that he was really provoked in a way to write what he wrote is pretty striking.
What about, and I tend to agree with you, not knowing him as you do, not knowing him at all, but from what I've heard about him and read about him and how I viewed him over the years, nonpartisan, easygoing to an extent, where not a conflict person, of course, doing his job very well, but in dealing with people. But if you're right, and I think you are, that there was maybe a sense of some kind of urgency or some kind of need to get this out there, while couldn't wait another 3 years of this kind of goings on of foreign policy decisions without at least the public and the media looking for what he had spotted in the past. But then the question arises: well, why didn't you resign, and why didn't you speak out at the time if this was so egregious?
Look, I think it's a fair question. I think it's a question I would ask, and came up in a certain tradition where you kind of grit your teeth and go along, and I think he had been a career CIA guy, and I think he just was more used to, that's a judgment call you make. Obviously, someone like you or me maybe would have said, that's enough, I can't take it, I'm leaving, I'm going public, and he decided I can do more good staying inside. But it's a fair question to ask, I think.
All right. And as far as Hillary and the revelations about Hillary, the shock that he expressed, Secretary Gates, in writing this, that he was privy to an exchange between President Obama and Hillary Clinton, where she got the worst of it, the way it comes off. She stated flatly that she voted against the surge in Iraq in 2007 because, according to the book, because she told Barack Obama in front of Gates that I had a running against you in Iowa in the primaries, and then Obama allegedly, in a softer manner, fired back that he too, his vote was also political but less specific. So, Obama's not running again, as far as we know. So let's focus on Hillary. Is this something that goes away? Because he also complimented Hillary, but I think it's hard for Hillary to, if she's going to use the book or her people are going to use the complimentary quotes at all, to ignore the indicting quote here about her vote on Iraq.
Yeah, I don't think it goes away because it's about something serious. It's one thing if you say something, glib and distasteful even, and it just has no real, going forward importance. But Iraq is a real issue. It's a real place. She voted for the war. She then tried to repudiate the war and, of course, opposed the surge when it now appears she knew better. She then was part of an administration, a Secretary of State, that didn't complete a status of forces agreement with Iraq, that walked away. She sat there quietly as the president gave speech after speech. I've ended that war, and now we see al-Qaeda raising the black flag over Fallujah. I think it fits into the question of how pliant she was, how politically motivated she was in her conduct of foreign policy and her foreign policy decisions, and the fact that it's going to end up being a failed foreign policy. I've never thought Hillary Clinton would be a very strong candidate in 2016, because I think she'll have to defend a foreign policy that, unfortunately for the country, is going to be a failure and could be a pretty dramatic failure.
We're talking to Bill Kristol, founder and editor of the Weekly Standard, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Okay, let's talk for a minute about Fallujah. So much blood and treasure spilled in that second battle in Fallujah, especially, and I think al-Qaeda knew exactly what it was doing in picking that battle and then being able to fly the flag over that city. And it just seems like everything's in disarray. We're certainly not sending any troops back in there, and it begs the question, I guess, why we left in the first place, because we didn't. We're still in Germany. We're still in Korea. We're still in other places where we didn't win and then leave, but we did that in Iraq.
Yeah, the irony is when he took over, Iraq was actually in very good shape. The end of 2008, when Obama took over, it had been very rough for several years, but the surge had worked. He frittered that away. You can blame Maliki as you should. You can blame just the Middle East, a tough place, but we're now seeing in Syria and in Iraq what a Middle East with no U.S. presence, no U.S. leadership, no U.S. strength, no fear of the U.S. looks like. And it's pretty horrifying. And some people can sit here and say, well, they're kind of killing each other, frankly, and it's not our problem. And a lot of the people who are killing each other are kind of distasteful. But at some point, it spills over and starts endangering our allies, our interests. At some point, you get an arms race, as it were, among the bad guys, and one of them goes nuclear, then the next one does. I think we're really beginning to see the snowball, unfortunately, of a failed American foreign policy in the Middle East. And it could be a big moment. I hope it encourages conservatives to be, whatever their views, we obviously differ among ourselves in some aspects of foreign policy, but to be serious about foreign policy and national security. I think we'd actually end up agreeing more than people think about the need for a strong U.S. We might disagree on some aspects of how intervention is to be, but, we are running an experiment of weakness that is really dangerous.
Yeah, I worry about where we are with Israel, too, and I don't know what this administration has, if anything, over Netanyahu and company, but I just, based on what's happened with Iran and based on the way Netanyahu's been treated over 5 years, it's almost like, hey, go take a hike. But instead, it seems like Netanyahu is talking about the framework. This is 68 borders, pre-68 borders, and this is, getting rid of the West Bank, and they're, instead of dismissing it out of hand, as Netanyahu schooled and lectured Obama at the White House on that time, who could forget that, when the 68 borders were addressed. Why are they even entertaining this?
I don't know. There's a huge amount of pressure on any Israeli prime minister to get along as much as he can with the U.S., and especially if he feels he has to do something with respect to Iran. Maybe he doesn't want to pick an additional fight. But I agree. You look at that and you think, well, certainly Netanyahu knows better. Let's hope he knows what he's doing when he sort of tries to accommodate, isn't making any concessions that he'll end up regretting later on. But this is the position Obama's put our friends in, incidentally. So, our enemies are encouraged And our friends are feeling like, how do we navigate these very difficult waters? It's a terrible situation.
Breaking news as we took to the air for this particular interview, Bill Kristol, and that is Governor Christie has responded to the revelations today of the emails. We just had Paul Molshine on before you from the Star-Ledger talking about the emails that have been revealed that show that one of three of the top deputies on Christie's senior staff, in advance of these lane closures at the George Washington Bridge, wrote to David Wildstein, the top Christie appointee at the Port Authority, who resigned, saying time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee. He responded. They made jokes about it. This is before it happened. So Christie responded just moments ago saying, I am outraged. I was misled by staff members, and this is the first I'm seeing of it. What do you make of that response to what we've learned today?
Well, we'll have to see what else comes out, and if that's true, that's true, and he just had some bad apples on his staff, and he didn't supervise them maybe as closely as he might have, but,
Hard to believe, though, Bill? Hard to believe?
I mean, it's certainly, no. I mean, he's a busy guy running for re-election, a million things happening, maybe overeager staff people, but I think I would say this, I sort of poo-pooed this, like I think almost everyone did when it first came out. It looked like it's just a Democratic attempt to tarnish Christie, who'd won a big victory, and, but sometimes you poo-poo these things, and it turns out there's a paper trail, and it's not good for the person. And I've learned over the years that when you get into the middle of this kind of situation, it's foolish to try to guess where you're going to end up, because we don't know what else is out there, right? And we don't know what these guys are going to say now that Christie has said, I didn't know anything about what they said. What if one of them says, well, actually, I did have a conversation with the governor? So these things can go in any which way, and it's dangerous. I think it is dangerous for Christie. On the one hand, it's kind of a silly little thing, you might say, compared to being president of the United States. But this is stuff he did that was done under his supervision as governor. It's not just he said something silly, you apologize a day later, and it kind of goes away, right? I mean, this is an actual act, apparently, taken by people in the state government or people affected, at the urging of people in the state government by, I guess, the Port Authority, and I think it's got real risks for Christie. And
either way, right? I mean, even if he fires the people involved and they don't say I talked to the governor, either way, for 2016, it's not gonna do him any good, certainly.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah, it's not the story they wanted to have. I was talking about, 2 months after a huge re-election victory and after he signed legislation that he was touting that shows how inclusive a governor he can be, and then this has done some real damage, I think. Okay,
listen, I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure.
Bill Kristol, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. I agree. I was shocked. I saw it come across the wires as I was sitting here talking to Bill, and I'm glad we got his response. Dangerous for Christie. It's done real damage to Christie, and I have to tell you, I don't understand, and here's why. Because this was a big deal, okay? This was a big deal. Now, either he doesn't know his staff, he doesn't have any idea what they're capable of. He doesn't have any idea how low they'd go and how they'd and what does it say about his staff? Now, he says he was misled. He says he's outraged, he was misled, and this is the first time he's, I guess, seen these emails or whatever. It could be. He could be outraged. It could be the first time he's seen the emails, seen them, and he could be, outraged, and he could feel misled in some regard. So this could all be true, but what does it say? If this is what your top staff members are doing and you don't know it, and in the aftermath of the closures, when all of this was out there and the investigation started, was launched and the questions started being asked, what did Christie say? Oh, this is no big deal. I know why you're doing this because I'm a national figure. Did he go to his people? Did he say, did any of you do this? Was this a traffic study? I want to see the study. Did he do any of that? Was he lied to? But did they just tell him bald-faced lies to his face? These are questions that have to be asked. They really have to be asked. All right, folks, we're coming back. Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax TV and radio.